In this live training, I'm going to cover a few things in Planning Center that might make it a little easier for our services to be aligned at the remote campuses of Mercy Hill. Now, some of this may apply outside of our remote campuses, but in the particular case where we do a playback service, it's great since we already have the amount of times that are expected for those particular parts of a service to go ahead and use those specific times in our service plan so that everyone at the particular campus who's watching Planning Center can stay on time exactly as needed. It also helps us with hitting our cues for things like lighting transitions or when the keyboard starts playing either at the beginning or ending of a service, things like that. So let's take a look at Planning Center, and hopefully you'll get a better feel for what I mean in relation to what we're trying to accomplish here. So here we are in a sample event, and I've actually just taken information from a previous event that we had. This might have even been just last week's service. So I just copied all the information in here. So we've got some pre-service items. We have our worship set, which is at the beginning, and some details relating to that. Some times are already loaded. We have a bumper video, which we generally do at the beginning of most teaching segments of the service. So in this particular case, we have a 30-second bumper video that plays back. And then we have our sermon section, and this is the section we're going to spend the majority of our time in. After the sermon, we have some other service elements like reading scripture, another worship set, and our campus pastor will send everybody out. So in specific detail around the sermon, we've got just a general timer, and at our broadcast campus, the general timer would be used to help keep that pastor on cue or on time. He may glance up and see that he's got 5 or 6 minutes left and know that he can hit another sermon illustration before he needs to wrap things up. So we give a 35-minute timer just for that segment, and that timer changes depending on the service. But once that sermon is recorded and we send that recording to a campus for playback, we should know exactly how long he was on stage. So let's go ahead and input that information. So what I want to do is actually take you into a tool that we should have at most campuses, and if you don't have it, request it. I'd be happy to get you this tool. It's just a simple numbers document. And so I'm going to pull up numbers here, numbers or Excel. You can make the same thing in there. So we've got sermon details, and as you can see, there's a video start time, a keys start time. Keys would be like when our keyboard player plays a little bit underneath the sermon as he's closing out. We have a prayer start time, which we need this for a cue that we change our lighting in the service. So when there's a lighting change, we've got that cue. And then the sermon end. And below that, you have exact timestamps. So in a case like this, we have at 1 minute and 34 seconds on the drive, that is when our sermon starts. Same for key start, prayer start, and sermon end. And as you can see, when I selected these, it gave me the ability to edit them. So I could say keys might start actually at 31 minutes in, or thinking about the timestamp specifically, it could be 31 minutes and 32 seconds on the timestamp on the drive. That's when keys would start. Or sermon end might be somewhere closer to, like, say, around 37 minutes in. And you just list it minutes and seconds. The key about this template is that it takes the time math out of the equation. And so we can see now, as these changes are made to the timestamps on the drive, it also updates the duration of these items in our sermon durations section. So let's see how we would actually use this in Planning Center to be a benefit to us. So we'll jump back into Planning Center. And I'm going to go ahead and edit this first item that's selected for the sermon. And I'm going to say this is sermon start to keys. The reason why it's start to keys is because keys is our first cue after the sermon starts. And we want to have the duration for how long it takes to go from the start of the sermon to the start of the keys. Now, it defaulted to the 35 minutes because that's what we had in the previous plan. But let's take another look here. Sermon to keys was actually 29 minutes and 58 seconds. So we'll back into Planning Center, 29 minutes, 58 seconds. And we can take all the notes out. You leave them or don't leave them. It just changes what you see here is fine. And let's just double check my time. 29 minutes, 58 seconds. Correct. I'll stop editing. And now we actually have a specific time that it will take to get from the sermon start to the keys. Next thing we need to do is add an additional line item. So you can use the add button. We'll drag an item down here right below sermon start to keys. And we're going to call this one keys to prayer. The reason why that's important is because we have another lighting transition that happens at prayer, and we will need to put that duration in. So I'm going to pull up my calculator again. Keys to prayer was 2 minutes and 25 seconds. So we're going to add that in here. Close the editor. So now we have another timer that we will be able to trigger in our services to let somebody know when the lights are happening. And then the final timer that we would need would be an item that is prayer to the end of the sermon. Because at the end of the sermon, we have another transition that our video switcher operator needs to have, as well as our lighting operator. So this is going to be prayer to end. Let's check our duration. Prayer to end is 3 minutes and 22 seconds in this particular case. All right, and now we've got all of the different cues in relation to our playback, and these are exact, and everyone who is monitoring Planning Center in this particular campus can know exactly where we are when we're doing the playback. Now, there are a few things that may need to be addressed in order to make sure our timers in the back of the room display properly. So for one thing, these times need to be included. So sometimes as you're adding new line items, they don't actually get included into the flow of the plan. So you'll want to make sure that they are listed as include. Or if there's an item that you don't want to include, you could remove that. So like, for example, I oftentimes will exclude the countdown video item. It's a minute worth of countdown that they already see on the screen in the front. They don't need to see it on our clocks in the back. So that's just a way that you can include or exclude items in the Planning Center Services live playback. But now we've completed everything that we need for service. And as we were to continue through service, if we were to select these items as we go at the specific times, then everybody can look at the clocks and know exactly where they're at and they can hit their cues without any trouble. This is what we would prefer as the best practice at all of our remote campuses. Hopefully that makes sense to you as to why we would use that and why those specific things are needed. Looking back again at the sermon time calculator, I did have an additional item here, keys to end. Now this item doesn't actually get added into Planning Center. The reason why I have this is that in the morning when our keys player is looking at what their schedule and plan might be for music, they may want to know just in general, how long am I going to be up there at my keys playing while the pastor is still teaching on the playback? And this duration is simply just for that. As far as the details of when you get these timestamps, you have a couple ways you could do that. One, you could just be listening in on the playback pre-service to find the specific times. Or our production leads from our broadcast campus will more likely be sending you these timestamps as they've notated them as the recording was originally captured. Hopefully that helps to clear up any confusion on that. And check back again for more training in Planning Center. If you have questions related to what we just described here, certainly leave a comment or reach out to me directly. Thanks for watching.